What's the first thing you think of when you think about the Terminator franchise? Big action, big spectacle, big spoilers in the advertisement.
Done to my son.
Survival's what you taught me.
Seriously, they've been doing this since the second film.
Now his mission,
Get down.
is to protect it.
But whenever the series is talked about, it's usually about its sequels. Terminator 2 when discussing the franchise positively, and the rest when talking about the franchise negatively. But what about the first one? Why is the original Terminator so overlooked when compared to its sequels? James Cameron directed both films, and it's the only film in the franchise to have a 100% on Rotten Tomatoes. And yet Terminator 2 is the one that gets the most attention as one of the greatest action films of all time. It wrote the book on how to make a sequel, enhance all the original strengths while downplaying all its weaknesses. But there wouldn't be a Terminator 2 without the original. And not only is The Terminator an important film for the entire franchise and for cinema as a whole, it holds up well. It holds up really well. Watching the first Terminator really puts a lot of things about the franchise and in filmmaking in general in perspective. The Terminator has a basic premise. Two men emerge naked from two different electrical storms. Both are from the future and both are after one thing: Sarah Connor, mother to John Connor, leader of the future resistance that will take down Skynet, an artificial intelligence system that has been ruling humanity after destroying most of the population with nuclear missiles. While basic, the narrative of the Terminator has a lot more depth than people realize. While the premise may seem predictable, especially if one has seen its sequels first, at a certain point, just like the machine itself, the Terminator stops being predictable. The film starts showing plot points that you realize isn't in the sequels. Plot points that have more depth and nuance than you realize. Like how the goal of the hero's time traveling isn't to correct a past mistake, but to make sure history stays the same. That's because in this film, the evil machines in the future lost. Even after destroying most of humanity with nuclear weapons, Skynet still loses in the end, and time travel is a desperate final gambit from the villains, not the heroes. Skynet's defeat acts as a metaphor to the entire movie. The Terminator is presented as this unkillable, unstoppable murdering machine with its endless arsenal of powerful guns. But you know what stops it in the end? The very same humans that have been trying to kill throughout the entire movie, proving that there is no greater weapon than the human spirit. The Terminator's unpredictable storytelling can best be seen with the film's three key players: Sarah Connor, Kyle Reese, and the Terminator. Like the film itself, each of these three characters play out generic action film archetypes. Until they don't. Sarah Connor is introduced as your typical slasher movie main character of innocent female thrust into highly dangerous situation where she loses everyone she loves. And yet, she refuses to give up, grows stronger, and eventually comes out the other side. Linda Hamilton does a great job in portraying your everyday waitress who throughout the film has to deal with her whole life falling apart because of things she can't control, but eventually surviving and becoming stronger as a result. The Terminator comes across as a classic slasher movie villain, but what makes it scary is how over time how little it has in common with any slasher movie villain in the 1980s. It doesn't have any preference on who to kill, doesn't show any emotion at all at what it does, and there's nothing unique or interesting about the way he murders his targets. He just shoots people with his guns, and that's what makes it terrifying, because that's what a murderer in real life would also do. Cameron combines a cerebral machine with a singular purpose with an uncomfortable amount of human practicality in how it goes about its purpose to create an iconic movie character. It goes without saying that Arnold Schwarzenegger is the Terminator. Being told to play a robot trying to be a human is a lot easier said than done, especially when that robot has so few lines. The way his eyes have this complete detachment towards everything, and yet every scene he's in is never boring. And lastly, Kyle Reese looks and acts like the typical action movie star with his now famous quote of,
"Come with me if you want to live."
But as the audience sees more of him, you realize that living an entire life of fighting and surviving leads to an emotional wreck of a human being. This is thanks to Michael Biehn's phenomenal performance, with special mentioning being the interrogation scene, where Reese is giving exposition in the most haunted way possible.
Shut up! You still don't get it, do you? He'll find her. That's what he does! That's all he does! You can't stop him! He'll wait for you, reach down her throat, and pull her fucking heart out!
Reese's appearance should also be appreciated in conveying his character. Disheveled, messy, and malnourished, Reese doesn't look like some hyper-masculine action star, but a soldier who spent his whole life living on bare necessities. This is the kind of guy who actually does look like he survived off of rats as food. It cannot be understated how big of a risk the Terminator was. Cameron was a nobody in Hollywood with one film under his name. His pitch of a war movie between humans and machines in the future had to get descaled into a time travel action film set in Los Angeles. The budget was pathetic. $6.4 million. That is literally almost 5% of the budget of its sequel. They even had to film some scenes without a permit, with Cameron having to lie to the police about what they were doing. No one had faith in this movie. Even Schwarzenegger was only interested because a star lead in a contemporary film would be good for his career. But just like the humans overcoming the unstoppable machine, the filmmakers pulled through despite everything going against them. Without a big budget, the film could only rely on its writing, performance, and its vision, and it all succeeded. The Terminator is an iconic science fiction film thanks to the fact that nobody thought it would succeed. It teaches independent and aspiring filmmakers you can make a great science fiction action film without the biggest budget and without lavish expenses. All it needs is great writing, believable and relatable characters and performances, and a strong vision. A lesson even Cameron himself unfortunately seems to have forgotten. That the world's greatest special effects and action scenes don't mean as much without a strong story backing those things up. And while the Terminator is a bit rough around the parts, it holds up as a classic among science fiction and even horror films with its unique premise and situations. While things may seem hopeless, the struggle and success of Sarah Connor and Kyle Reese shows that even in overwhelming odds, the future is not set.